Like, I hope that this is constructive criticism that makes sense, that will be interesting. Okay, so I'm starting, right? Yep, the video's on, everything. Okay. Should we do this again?
Nee, I'm sitting here.
Okay, okay.
Wem gehört die Jacke hier?
Alrighty, so now the important thing is that I will try to give very constructive criticism. I'm really not bashing Linux, of course. I love and hate it at the same time, like probably most of you. But the thing is that people have very different expectations of Linux, especially people who don't know what Linux is, how the community works, and I'm sort of trying to give this perspective. Maybe in the future I'll make like a video or something about this that'll be online. We'll have a video, right? So this is like a perspective on what I think the expectations should be from Linux, and specifically Linux audio, because this is something that all of us are involved in a lot. And this was done after several years of talking to developers, meeting them personally, asking their opinions, debating on the mailing list. All of us probably have seen these debates. And so let's start. So Linux. So the first thing, and this is like something that I tried to word very carefully, Linux software is mostly hobbyists' projects. So now the important thing here is that, first of all, mostly, not all of them, some of them are professional, and hobbyist projects, not people. People could be professionals. The coders themselves could be professionals, but the projects are very often just their hobby. They're not making money with them. So the exception to this, and to the exception to the overall sort of like criticism, and you can look at it just characteristics of many of the hobbyist software, is that the exception is to the software which was commercial, but after a number of years became open sourced and became free software under a free license. Blender, I'm not sure about GIMP. GIMP could have been free software from the get-go, so it could have been one of the exceptions that is, in my view, a pretty solid software, even when you listen to what I say, that it does pretty good. Many other things, okay, so I mean, you probably know other projects. I don't have anything right to mind. Firefox, yeah. So we also have some video, I think, projects that were the Lightworks.
Many.
Yeah, so yeah, so there are the software which was commercial and then became free is usually has a different story. It's more stable. It has a better thing. Now, what better? So the first thing that many Linux hobbyist software lacks is a professional roadmap. Now, this is something that whenever I'm working right now as a product manager, and I've worked as a product and project manager for software, and now having this perspective, I sort of understand, oh, so product management is not this boring thing that does not mean anything, actually does carry a function, and a very important one. And so the thing is that the software that does not have a roadmap is basically a software that might not even have a clear vision. And so you don't know what you're doing. You're like, oh, I want to make a video editor. Okay, what kind of video editor? Tailored towards what kind of audience, what use cases and workflows we're looking for. And so what we have very often is that people don't have the understanding of use cases. You ask for somebody to implement a feature, and they have it in their list, but because they don't have a roadmap, they just say, okay, okay, I'll take this one. Then they do a feature, and they don't understand what the use case is. One of the examples is that Giada, which I enjoy, which is a very good project, I was asking them to make this. So imagine you have a looper software and you want on the fly to shrink a loop to some certain point. But their sample editor was not tied to the grid. So I asked them, could you please sort of, in the loop editor, divide it into the grid, into the bars, so that I can actually like shrink it 2 bars exactly. And they're like, yeah. And then they did it. But I can't use it anyway because they didn't build a use case for that. Like, why do you want to do that? What is the actual use case for this? When are you going to do this? Like, as a user, I want to, while I'm performing, or what? I'm changing a loop, why? What I'm trying to achieve. They didn't ask that, they just implemented it. So when I opened the software, I was like, yes, finally. And as I'm doing this, it turns out that the loop changes each second as you're moving it, and you just can't use it during the performance. What I wanted was to take the loop point, while it's playing the full loop, I'm moving it and then I'm letting it go, and it seamlessly starts playing shorter loops. But they didn't do that because they didn't have the use case in their mind, and they never even asked. And that's okay. I mean, I understand they meant well. I can talk to them again and ask them, and they'll do this fine. But that's something that you will never see in commercial software because you would have to think, okay, why are they asking for this? What are we doing anyway? So that's one thing, one problem of not having a roadmap. Another problem is that when you don't have a roadmap in general for the software, you don't have the product vision, then you end up with software which has at the center like odd features and no basic stuff or a lot of basic stuff missing. Now that's not a random thing in Linux. It's simply because very often this is a hobby project that people are not doing roadmaps for. They're not thinking about it as a product. They're just thinking about, I just want to do this, which I totally understand. I do this all the time myself. I write like amateur games and I would start a game like, I have no idea what the game will be about. I just have this one idea and just do this. So that's normal. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm just saying that the expectations of the end result should be this because that's what they're doing. Then there is something that I call kind developer syndrome. So we all love developers that listen to us and say, so what do you want? You want this feature? I'll do it. And this sounds like a good thing, but in reality, very often it turns out to be a bad thing for the product. Because whenever we're talking about commercial software, very often, and this is something that free software developers very often would argue against, that this is bad, that software would force you into one workflow. But actually there is a practical reason for this, because when you have a particular workflow in mind, you don't have to think about other use cases, you don't have to maintain several options. Whereas in free software, it's very typical to say, you know what, we'll add this option, let the user choose. This sounds kind of like, okay, why not? But then you have to maintain this use case, you have to maintain that use case. If you maintain just one, then that use case becomes kind of not complete. And you may have bugs here and there, and now you're all screwed. And that's something we see a lot, especially in bigger projects like QTractor. The amount of ways you can add a track there is simply 3, 4, 5 different methods, 3 different methods to add a track. It's like, it's okay, but that means that at every point there could be a problem later on. And do you want that? No, not really. So another thing, so that's not having the roadmap, and that's it. So we're done with the roadmap. These are the main problems I think that we have there. Now, the other thing, that ideology replaces rational thinking about software. And this is a big one, guys. This is a big one, guys. On Linux audio mailing list, you can see those discussions. It's a lot about ideology. It's not about the practical uses of software. For example, so free software is regarded generally as an antipod to commercial software. If commercial software does one thing, then we have to do absolutely another thing. If a lot of Windows software, as people just say Windows software, if it's okay, if Windows software has good UIs, then we have to go from the command line. Not because we think the command line is better. We can argue, of course, that it's better. It's very difficult to prove that it's better. It's better in some cases. It's not better in other cases. But they would say simply because Windows has UI, therefore we should have UI. Or Windows has good UI, therefore we should have other types of UI, which unfortunately very often becomes bad UI. One of the reasons was a knob example. And in Linux audio community, you will very often hear debates about knobs. Should you have knobs or text fields? Now, it turns, for some weird reason, it's always about ideology. Well, if you're, if you have a knob, that's just trying to emulate hardware, that's not it. In reality, a knob has a very practical use, and if you've ever performed live, you know this. As a user of the software, you know that a knob is there because there are 2 reasons for this. One is that you can clearly see where the setting is. You don't have to calculate. You see it. Here it is. And that's a very important point. It's super important. And of course, the second thing is that you can match it to hardware. The thing that it's like an interface to actual hardware, and people might have something set up under hardware, and then they quickly match it with what they have in the software. That perhaps is a rare use case, but whenever you're working with DJ stuff, that's very often what you need. You might have a DJ, for example, panel that will automatically move their knobs to what you have in the software, and you might want to do vice versa. In reality, you always do it vice versa because this is a rare kind of hardware, right? And it actually breaks pretty quickly as well.
Motor faders.
Yeah, so you just want faders that are automatic.
I broke one.
Yeah, so you don't want automatic faders. Let's say that you're starting a project and you have a frequency, like cutoff frequency like this. On your hardware, it's like this. If you turn it on, it'll do. You don't want to do that. So you're just quickly matching it in a live situation. You don't want to have text boxes. It's not ideology, it's just practice. But that's what I'm saying, that ideology replaces rational thinking about software, which I think means that we have a lot of bad ideas about software, and in reality we have very unpractical software. So something that is sort of, I just wanted to mention that at the same time that people talk about knobs, there was one discussion that prompted me to think about this point exactly, were the baffling philosophical discussions about UI. If you look at the commercial sector, whether you like it or not, those people usually know what UIs are better and which are not, and at least they know the basics. You can argue about whether this UI is better than that, but you know the basics. You know that if it takes you 3 clicks, it's better if it takes you 1 click, and you know some basic stuff. And when you have these philosophical discussions, it's like, guys, can we please skip the basics and maybe argue about something more difficult, different? But again, in my view, a lot of this is about ideology, because it's like commercial software, non-commercial software, and I'll later on just mention 2 very common arguments that I see on the mailing list all the time, which address that straightforwardly. Now, another point, so we have no roadmap ideology. Another point is that the hobbyist software world is usually dev-centric, developer-centric. Now, this is not a good or bad thing. This is just how it is. Linux, in many ways, viewed by many as a place where developers do things the way they want it. And it's absolutely fair thing. I'm not criticizing that. But that means that there are certain consequences of this kind of philosophy. First thing that I want to mention is that user is usually absolutely normally burdened by compromises of the developer. Like, well, you know, this library doesn't work, so, you know, you don't have rendering for a while. But if you're like, so as a user you should expect this, but if you want to do something for the user, that's of course not very good. If you're doing this for basically yourself or for development, that's okay. Or you would say, you would get some situation where you can't deliver something, and you would explain this by simply, you know, developer terms. You would not think whether this is important for the software. You would not think in terms of whether this is important for the workflow. We don't have a library, so that's it. And that's something that if you would be user-centric, if you would really, it's not about even commercial things. That's the thing that many people miss. It's about caring whether your software is a tool or not. If your software is your hobby and it's not really about your tool, then this is the thing you're going to do. So there, of course, like Ardor is a good example, like, right? So there is actually a particular workflow which is being forced on you, more or less. And which I believe to be a good thing. And then you have many things that are sort of user-centric, more, in my view. At least the way that I looked at this, it was more, even more than, I guess, QTractor. Whereas QTractor, I think, is a fascinating piece of software, and I think Rui is doing a great job, but it has more of the things that I mentioned. So, and then let's go to, and finally, the dev-centric thing is, I want to say, is that dev opinion usually overrides user opinion, like just simply by default. It's like developer knows best. It's like they say, mother knows best. So let's go to typical arguments, because so one argument, and I'm quoting, there is no reason at all to assume that the average user's ideas are the right ones. So what do you think? So that's an interesting argument. So this is what I argue. I actually think that there is a reason to think that the average users.
Who said it?
I can't say. I won't say this on camera.
I can think of several people
Actually, many people believe that. I heard that from many prominent developers in the Linux audio scene.
Okay.
And in fact, I think that this is a fine argument. I'm not saying that people who are saying this are wrong. I'm just saying that I have an answer to this, and my answer to this would be that actually an average user has a reason to believe that that UI idea is better than the other, because when we go to commercial world, or to be honest, it's not about commerce, it's about when we go to software which is user-oriented. For some reason, people are simply focusing on what the user gets, even though maybe they are the user themselves, right? Then you have a very, very high pressure. You have competitive pressure. You want your tool to be used, therefore you're gonna try to tailor to users' needs, and also you will have just natural selection of software. Software that has bad user interface will not be used in live situations, And people will tend, for example, if we're taking a live situation, people will tend to use one type of software with the other. And so the reason why Seek24 on Linux that I showed you is used as a live tool more than, for example, Ardor, is because it has better design for this particular thing. If it would have been worse, then Ardor would have been used more frequently. So an average user using a lot of software which is under heavy competitive pressure actually has a pretty good idea of why UI is better. He might not voice it very well. Like, people might not know why knobs are important because they maybe never used that. But people who do know, they'll say, no, actually we went through this already. I had text things, I had sliders, and knobs were better, and here's why. And so there usually is a reason. Remind me after this, actually I have it written down there, to talk about competition in the free software world, which exists there. And so that's my answer, that there's a natural selection of UIs and an average user tends to know what's best. The other argument is this: the way typical Windows software works is not dictated by user interest. It is determined entirely by the short-term views of marketeers. Something that is so typical of free software development communities. Is it true? So, of course, let's limit ourselves to Linux audio and make things simple. So if we look at audio commercial software, this is like blatantly false. This is like not true at all, because most of the companies that we see are super user oriented. They employ a huge amount of testers. Ableton Live, I believe, when they released like first versions, there was a documentary about them. They showed a room of people like testers. They very often would employ popular musicians who would actually test software. Tractor Studio, now known as I think just Tractor. It was DJ Tractor Studio, something like that. It had Richie Houghton was one of the famous DJs who was actually working with the software, and they were testing it in live situations.
This is a good example, this tractor thing. This is a device from hell. In the end, you have got your super user. I was a survivor of this.
Yeah.
You're just turning knobs, and it is horrible, and it's just, you can do anything with one knob, and it's playing for itself, and horrible people make horrible music with it, really.
Yeah, so I mean that's actually great design. So if we talk about Tractor specifically, it's like slightly off topic, but they actually wanted to do things. They wanted to stop
Tractor
the
itself
DJ.
was cool, but later they made a big hardware with it.
I know.
And this thing is crazy, thing from hell.
Some people tend to disagree.
Tractor itself with stand mixers, I can.
So I mean that thing also evolved sort of. So if through like talking to DJs that actually performed, that they would have automations for like typical things, like switching things, it sort of makes you feel as if it does things for yourself, but in reality you can actually focus on the mix finally. So that's their basic agenda, that we're gonna make the DJ focus on the music and forget about like doing this all the time. Because whenever you see DJs doing these like actual like old school, how do you call them, the decks, turntable decks, really what you're looking at is this. Like, wow, how he's doing this. I don't care what he's playing, look. So here they said, we want to care about what we're playing, so forget the knobs, I just want to make it work. So, but anyway, so I think, so whenever we have software that is like a tool, that is a tool, not just doing something, but like a specific tool, making music, then you have, it's very user-centric, it's not about marketing at all. In fact, if you think about that, it's like, okay, it's short-term marketing. If it's so short-term, how come Ableton survives? Like, or FL Studio, or other software on a reason. So if that survives, therefore maybe it's not so short term. So I think that this is, but these are typical arguments, and I think that they're not very good. Whoa, what's going on?
That's because probably she's the cable is under the chair. Under the road.
Okay, so finally, I'm almost done. Finally, the last point is about competition. So competition exists almost everywhere, in every field of human activity. There is this competition. The thing is that people very often think that competition is only about money, which it's not. Competition is simply about competition. So free software world has competition, and this competition shapes the end result. So whereas commercial software actually sells a product, therefore it has to be user-centric to survive, and we have this natural selection of tools that actually do their job, and they have to be stable and all that kind of thing. Free software world does not have too much user-centricity in mind. but it has several things. First of all, it has the licenses. Free software is actually naturally selected against licenses. One of the best examples is open software and LibreSoftware. LibreOffice, OpenOffice, LibreOffice, like great example of everybody just saying nah and turning to LibreOffice, and that thing kind of sort of, I don't know if it died out completely or not, but it's last time I checked it was worse, let's say. It had less features, it was not surviving that well.
OpenOffice had less features.
So OpenOffice has less, and when the community switched to LibreOffice, that was all done based on ideology and licenses and being afraid that that Oracle would put a license or something like that. So that's competition there. Software that has a particular software license that caters to a particular audience is more likely to survive, even if it's crap. For example, Linux audio community rarely uses Renoise because it's not free software. So there you go. So another thing is, of course, the development process and sort of the charisma of the developer and the ideology of the developer. That plays a big role as well. Some people stick with software because the community is good, because they like the community, and there's a lot of it. Like Linux basically is a community. It's like not an industry, right? It's a community most of the time. And so this is also, I think, selected against. And when you see these kind of things, you eventually understand why the end result is like this. It's not like this randomly. It's like this because it has been sort of naturally selected, because it has competitive pressure in certain points, but it has very small competitive pressure on the functionality side, because you usually have only one piece of software. You just have GIMP. You can, of course, try GNU Paint. Try that. But then you'll go back to GIMP, because GIMP is basically the only game in town. And so because you have very often these only games in town, you don't have a lot of pressure on functionality. You have a lot of competitive pressure on other things. So there you go. So that's all my talk on this, and I hope it was useful and interesting, and thought-provoking. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was a fantastic demonstration and talk, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy to be here because I've heard a long time about here, and it's pretty cool that I finally got here.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, and everybody thanks.
I saw people making notes about the software.
Yeah.
And of course we have it on camera, so we can look it up later.
Yeah, and I like that trance album you spoke about. I listened to that on Bandcamp during the week. That was cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, any pressing questions?
Yes, as you mentioned at Renoise, I think that there's kind of a split between Linux audio users and the demos scene using Renoise. That's probably what's keeping Renoise alive. But also that there's this cross-platform functionality. But where do you see a competitor to Renoise?
To Renoise?
Yeah.
Competitor to Renoise, like a functional competitor.
Yeah.
Difficult to say. There are several trackers on Linux.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure there's a competitor to Renoise.
The
thing is that Renoise does not have. So for many people who switch to Linux audio for ideological reasons, Renoise does not have a proper license. But in general, it's like a very close community. It's like a very demo scene community. And I mean, I came from demo scene to the music. I wasn't part of the tracking scene, and so. But it's very close community. I actually even considered buying Renoise, but the thing is that I just at some point in time didn't like trackers. But but it's a very close community. I think it's the software is great. It's like one of the examples where you take tracker software and actually make it into a modern DAW, and that's something that not all trackers manage to do. Modbot tracker maybe is also like this nowadays.
Thanks.
Well, one question I have: how long do you usually work on such a droning track?
Depends. So it depends. Very different. Sometimes you just can't get it to work, and then you spend a long time. Sometimes it's very fast. It also depends on like the mood you're in. Meaning that, for example, I haven't done these things for about 2 years. So I mean, it's like a lifelong project. I never say stop. But I've been doing some other things, and I've not been doing music for a long time. Now I'm sort of getting back to it a little bit. If I'm in the mood, then I can do it very fast. I was managing to do like what I had 2 weeks and been 10 tunes per 10 weeks. But also it's like when I started, I had a lot of forms to explore. Sometimes you would just put one tone and it could work. You would pick the tone, you would try it out, it would work, and then we have, okay, I have a tune that has just one tone. Check. But then that means next time you can't do it because you did it already. So you explore several simple ideas and then you have to think of something else. But very often I do things very quickly. I'm unlike, if I'm in the mood, then I'll just throw everything out and I'll just do this for many hours a day.
But if you come back to something after 2 years, I would imagine that half of the software wouldn't work anymore under Linux.
Yeah, so fortunately it still works. So I'm using Rack-Correctin, QTractor, and I'm also actually using proprietary software. I'm using FL Studio right now, which works absolutely normally under Wine, which was like. So very often I'm mixed droning. If I use things from FL Studio, then I'll very often mix them in QTractor. But I'm right now thinking that maybe I should mix some things in QTractor in FL Studio. I'll see. I don't know. But
by the way, that was one announcement I think is kind of interesting. That finally, Win 32-bit VSTs are working again in Kala.
So message on the list. Yeah.
So you can use all these synthesizers.
Yeah, actually, I want to try it too. Before this used Vestige.
What are you using? Which bridge are they exactly using? The Airwave bridge?
No, Kala has a built-in.
Yeah, you don't know exactly which technique is behind this in Kala.
I think it was built on VST bridge originally, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
You could ask.
The Arch package, just Kala bridge Win 32.
Well, you have to use the JIT
No,
package.
I'm using it. I'm just curious because I know many VSD adapters, and now you're mentioning it. I just would like to
Carla
know.
Bridge would be my guess.
Which one?
Carla Bridge.
Carla.
I mean, that's what Falk built a long time ago, like 2-3 years ago.
Okay.
I think he's just reusing it. So.
Yeah,
Actually,
it hadn't been
actually
working.
tried
It
to
hadn't
help
been working for him, but not for Arch users. And now it's finally. But you have to use the JIT version from not younger than 2 days.
No.
Not older than 2 days.
No, yesterday. You're sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Great.
Did anybody use Bitwig?
Yeah.
I tried it out. It's of course like user-oriented software.
Yeah, users have to fix and find the bugs, and it's very unstable. What I heard, and so the users are feeling like the demo testers, though they are paying. And this is another perspective of the user, of the user case. That the user case is let's find problems and bugs first. It's a great project. It's a multi-platform, of course, but that would be my question now for you. It was great evening, but there was a little undertone that you see some problems. That was your talk about. So why? Because I'm totally euphoric and I'm so happy with Linux.
So you can be totally perfect with Linux if somehow the combination of what you need just works.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, is that not many people get into this combination, unfortunately. So for example, in my case, my biggest difficulty with Linux is that I need video editors, and I just don't have video editors. I was actually planning, I'm still thinking about it, so I actually found a video editor called Shotcut. So Shotcut is a video editor that the guys that did the MLT library. So MLT library is basically the main library. It's behind every Linux video editor. And it generally considered to suck. So I decided to go to the website and like read what the guys are saying. And whenever a software like is very unstable, it's fascinating to read the website, which says how great it is, and then go to the forums and find out that it's really not very great. And so OpenShot was a video editor of my choice, which I've used for many years and still use it, but it's very unstable. And one of the reasons it says like it's like unstable, like from capital U. It's like really unstable. So the developers explain that, well, it's because the GTK UI doesn't work correctly within the MELT library. So I went to the MELT library website like to read up. Maybe they have something to say. They're like, yeah, we have Shotcut. We're developing our own video editor. So I tried it out and it's not crashing. And I'm like, how bad should it be that you're happy that software is not crashing? But I mean, so yeah, so I'll see if it works. But if it does, then I plan to do like to make humorous. Like, does anybody know AVGN?
Yeah.
Maybe Nostalgia Critic. These kind of guys. Like you might make a humorous review on something. You might like destroy something, not very seriously. Some criticism is valid. Some is definitely not. I wanted to make something on video editors, and start adding like have like a Google hat. How many times you have to go to Google in order to figure out how it works. So on some versions of Ubuntu, you would have KDN Live video editor, which is generally good, but which on many versions of Ubuntu for me, each time you say add a clip, will just crash. So if you go to Google, there is a workaround. You have to go somewhere into the XML file. You have to say yes, and then boom, it suddenly works. So one Google hat, and so I want to add some of these. But in general, yeah, so if you're happy, great. I mean, I'm really happy for people. There are many people who are happy, but you have to understand that if you're looking at a person who's doing many things, the more things you're doing, the less likely you are to be happy.
For example, video editor, have you tried Avidemux? This is stable over the years. I'm not using it much because I don't do much video editing, but when I'm using it, it's stable and it does everything.
Yeah, so Avidemux, I think the problem was there that it requires OGV as input, I think. Something like, I remember there was an input problem.
Maybe at that time.
Or DVV or something. I remember there was a problem that I just couldn't get MP4 into it. It would start redoing it into something else. I remember that was a problem. There actually, on the Linux audio mailing list, for some reason, I made an explanation, or probably philosophical discussions about something. I made like a quick short breakdown of all the video editors I could find on Linux and why I could not use them at that point in time. And the typical problem was that first, it does not work with the normal video formats. You have to do something with it. For example, the DV format, maybe it's a different software, but some software required you to turn it into DV format. 300 megabyte MP4 would turn into 3 gigabyte DV format. You're like, no, I won't do that. And it like takes an hour or something like that. The other very often problem that you can see is that it doesn't render normally, or you can't figure out how to render it, for example, for YouTube. You just can't. You try this and that, it just doesn't work. It gives you black screen, it gives you everything but no sound. At some point in time, KDN Live had a bug. At that point in time, I stopped using it, where it would render everything but no audio. And like the helplessness that you feel is that the developers know that the problem exists, but they're not fixing it. For some reason, I don't know why, but they're not fixing it. And so, yeah, so I mean, I'm very happy for people who are happy, but unfortunately, I'm not always happy. And as I'm not happy, I'm of course thinking, okay, I want to get things done, because I guess I'm more of a user than a developer. I mean, I'm not a developer, not for desktop. And so then I would think maybe I should switch, but there are many other reasons why I like Linux, so I don't want to switch. Also, I do like sort of this experimental nature, all this hobby software, which is great in many respects.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's still very amazing, but you just have to know the limitations that it has, and you have to expect them. So things like instabilities, of course. One of the things, guys, is that LibreOffice was a big disappointment for me last year. So I had to make a presentation with LibreOffice. What is Impress or LibreOffice Impress?
Yeah.
So actually, it has for many years already a killer bug which stopped many people, in fact, as far as I know, most people from using it. In that, if you're making a large presentation, at some point in time, it will start randomly deleting photos from your project. If you look into the XML project, you will actually see corrupted URLs, and there's no easy way to get them back. And this is a killer bug that killed several days of me working on a very big presentation that I wanted to do. This is a bug that has been lingering for years, and they just can't fix it. And I don't know why. They might have a good reason. I just know that it's unlikely to happen in commercial software. But that was one situation where we're like, oh, no. So I can't use LibrePress now. LibreOffice has a long-running bug of not being able to switch on dictionaries unless you do voodoo magic. So for example, if you're not English, like German, right? You have English by default, dictionary correction spelling works. You add German dictionary, it won't work. And so on some versions, that would happen, and there's no fix that I know of. And I went through the bugs, people submit them, and they just sit there for years.
There are open bugs for sure.
Open bugs, and nobody does anything. That's the bad thing, is that unfortunately open software is good model. Like, Richard Stallman does not like open source things. And I understand his ideology, so I mean, his argument is valid if you agree with his premises. But the open source model is absolutely great in a commercial setting when you have like actual pressure from users. Then you get things fixed quicker. Here I often see like these killer bots like within press, like, hey guys, what are you, like, what? You have to fix this. That's like should be the first priority. Nobody does that. Or somebody will say like they fixed it at some point and then it came back. Nobody knows why. And like maybe it changed. It's been like about a year ago, but that was something that I thought that LibreOffice is a very solid piece of software. Apparently, it's not.
No, it's not so stable.
Unfortunately, yeah, I was very disappointed with
For
this.
me, the mouse buttons are switched in the menus. I don't know why. several versions. I deleted the config files, everything from scratch. It's left when I click in tables or left button, normal, but when I have to click on file, I have to use the right mouse button. And in the menus, I can use the left button again.
And you probably, it's one of the things is that Google, Linux will always like say, like the Linux developer does not have to develop UI because it's already there, which seems to be a good thing, but then if something changes in that library, then your software is problematic, but the developer can't help it because he says, well, these guys are developing the library, I can't do anything. And that's like what the OpenShot guys are saying. And there's like OpenShot tune plans, do you know this? So people who follow video editors, like myself, like, oh, please give me a video editor. So there's OpenShot 2. The developer had a Kickstarter project where he decided to develop OpenShot 2 library, which he already delivered, but that's a library with no UI or anything like that. So like a replacement for a multi-library. And it's supposed to be like, finally you can do animations and all that stuff. We'll see if, I'll tell you later if Shotcut works. Shotcut also sort of has this. You have Singulara as well, which has its own like problems, but it's considered to be like pretty good software. But so OpenShot 2's now he's working on beautiful UI. He gives updates twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, and so that's a problem. It's like been 2 years. Everybody's like, where is it? Where is it? And also, I imagine this would be interesting to see. I imagine that when he releases it, it will be very buggy. Probably.
Look, you have the video editors. You have a great choice of them. We talk now about it. This is a problem. If we would bundle now the forces to only one project, then you would only have one video editor, but it would be ultra stable. And this is what I find out now.
Or not, and then you have a problem.
but this is the idea when you have plugins.
Like
for example, in audio music, we are now here musicians, then plugins, you maybe have one plugin for one special task, for example Guitarix for guitar sounds. There is Recorrect, but in principle you have only Guitarix. But Guitarix is so cool, so fat, 10,000 times better than anything I know from the Windows world. So I'm happy with it. For example, we don't need 100 projects and then concurrency or whatever, and we don't need the stupid user. We need a strong developer like Linux, for example. This guy must have a vision, and from his view, Linux or project is something different than for us, for sure. But I don't see the competition. I just see a strong developer, like you described before. And I'm happy because I'm stupid, really. And the developer must be good. And then I'm happy with it as a user. And for God's sake, like a contractor, for example, there is no workflow, and I can really, I'm loving it, getting free with it, everything all right. Ardor, for example, I'm trying since several years.
Come on, make a full stop, please.
Yeah. no, wait, it's important.
But
Ardor
keep
for
to
me,
one thought at a time.
Ardor, you can stick in the ass. I'm a musician since 20 years. I tell you, Ardor is, I can't use it. I don't know why.
Yeah, and then at the same time you're telling us there has to be one software to rule them all. Now you're saying the opposite.
Well, I think it's a lot. It's like GIMP, right? Is just basically the only free software project which deals with graphics, as far as I know. There's of course Inkscape,
Pixel graphics.
Pixel, and then you have Inkscape for vector, and these are So for some reason there are like smaller projects. I don't know a lot of them. Like New Paint is.
There's the one for comic painting.
There's these kind of things.
Peter, that's the one.
And there's JDE Suite and My Paint.
Okay.
Which is awesome.
My paint, yeah. I'm gonna try
But
to
it doesn't do. But it doesn't
Lido
do
paint.
editing,
Lido paint.
just painting. So.
Yeah.
Maybe
yeah.
maybe we can end the official part of the meeting, and then like always we go something, get something to eat. I
My
promised
opinion.
him. So
Yeah.
we can.
Join us.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So
Great.
thank you all for coming. Danke fürs hier sein. Wenn ihr möchtet, wir gehen jetzt noch was essen.
Nächstes Meeting.
Next Meeting ja, ist nicht im Dezember, sondern im 3. Januar, im 3. Mittwoch im Januar. Steht aber der Termin schon auf der Webseite. Wir checken aus, wirklich nur zum Mittwoch. Ich glaube schon. Ja, wir gehen jetzt rüber ins Hermanns, ist 5 Minuten zu Fuß. Wer mitkommen möchte, gerne. Ansonsten würde ich mich freuen, euch alle wiederzusehen. Schön. Okay.